Hello, everyone. Welcome to another discussion by myself, SΥmµn. And today I'm going to be talking about Pluto's transit through Capricorn. And in particular, I want to be looking at the kind of like reflecting on the past, reflecting on the nature of what has occurred for us during this period of time. You know, not going too deep into things, but also bringing a lot of things to our attention. And my main intention today with what I want to share with everybody is just to, connect with how we've all experienced, are experiencing, and probably going to experience this this cycle through Capricorn, Pluto cycle through Capricorn. From my point of view, I feel like all Pluto transits through all the signs are important and have a deep effect on us. But I definitely think that the Pluto transit through Capricorn has a very, very powerful impact in the way that we relate to ourselves as human beings. I feel that the nature of the transits that are busy occurring on a more subcategory with Uranus in Aries making a square to Pluto, Jupiter's transit through the zodiac starting at Aries. When Uranus was there, how it began to make the cardinal cross aspect when it was in Cancer, and of course the nodes when the nodes were there as well. And just the way that the nodes have moved through Pisces, when the nodes actually made when the South Node was conjunct Uranus in Aries, and it was obviously squaring Pluto as well. Saturn's transit through Scorpio. There's been some really, really intense alignments, and of course, I think all of them are, when we're paying attention to them. But these have been really, really big for us. So I just want to kind of bring all of that to attention. I know that there are millions and millions and millions of articles and videos and discussions on Pluto and Capricorn. So I get that this is a subject that, might seemingly be boring and probably is. But I wanted to really, highlight some stuff here that maybe gives the, in a sense that, it's not just about what we've read in those articles. There's more to it in that sense. So that's what I want to do today. So, how has everybody responded to Pluto's transit? Let's go back to 2008 when Pluto transited through Capricorn, and the vast majority of the world went into this deep financial panic when the infrastructure began to crash. And the amount of panic and insecurity that began to arise during that period of time. How was everybody's life during that stage? I mean, for some of you that have maybe got lots of financial investments, like your home, your mortgage, how did that affect you in that sense? Did you have any family members, or including yourself, that were like, oh my God, sell everything and move over to a country that's completely different to maybe the States? I remember I was actually living in the UK at that stage, working in a bank. And it was really interesting, actually, to experience their panic and their regulation change. I was actually working for a building society. So the structure of how that was defined at that stage was a lot more on, the society, like the people that were investing in the society, the building society. So the structure was a bit different, but still the same thing. How did you respond to the way that the banks were changing their interest rates, as an example? Anybody care to share for a moment, if you want to, that is any specific story that you've got when that transit occurred or started to occur for you?
I have something to share. This is Sarah West.
Yeah.
My husband at the time was a home appraiser. Okay. And it was very good for many, many years for appraisers, because during the process of refi, a lot of people would refi their home and grab some money out of it, So as the regulation came online, appraising for refi just fell off huge. So his
Yeah.
His livelihood was cut in half, or even greater than that, really fast. And then
Yeah.
one of his main clients picked him up, so we were kind of blessed in that way that at that time that picked him up, but it was not as, period. He had been in appraising for 15, 20 years, making a lot of cash. And then, so the regs changed everything, and it got tighter and tighter and tighter. And pretty soon it pretty much fell off. Like, thank goodness he went back to school and became something else for himself. He went into development. He became a software engineer. So he completely changed he has Pluto going through his first house, or he has Pluto in his first house when born, but it's in his fifth house now. So he really had to go back to college to really kind of regain what he was going to be doing in the world, So it was huge, absolutely huge. So
Yeah. And like just connecting to the emotional reality of having to go through such a change, especially being affected by the structure of how we place our security into certain institutions like that, and how something as powerful as Pluto just moves through a sign and can affect the whole structure of a family. I mean, and I bet that during that period of time, there were certain moments of your life where you were like, what are we going to do in some way? And then luckily angels came along and helped your husband out there with
absolutely. And I went back to work, so it helped us immensely at that period of time. And that was before a lot of change personal, because I was going to go through a spiritual awakening that changed everything and brought me to astrology. So I had greater awareness later, but yeah, at the moment of that change in 08, 09, very dynamic, huge.
Yeah. I mean, for any of you that at the time are parents to children, of course, and how the school systems began to change as well, like especially the Pluto and Scorpios, you were going to school during this period of time, or finishing up school at that stage, and most of you and your relationship to teachers were really difficult in some sense, because the relationship to authority and what they represented, especially the Pluto and Scorpio, the way in which your kind of generation is configured, there was a lot more, why do I need to do this? You could see through where the institutions were, providing information that you might not want or were interested in at all. So that in itself began to look at the way that, schooling systems were outdated, or the awareness of this process was going to start to break down. So those are the things, medical industry. I mean, this was very, very new with 2008, but as we progressed over up until 2014, a lot of this has really come up for our review. I mean, the fact that Facebook in itself just exploded completely during this period of time as well, where everybody then getting access to what it represents and reading articles and learning a lot more about the world, which I'll get into. But I mean, this is pretty much it. Like, how do you feel during this period of this transit? How is this transit, in the context of what it means, completely altered or infected your life in terms of the fear, in terms of anxiety, of uncertainty? Those are big things that definitely on a personal level have brought us during this period of time. And even today, we still have a lot of that happening. So yeah, I've got a slide for us, so I'm going to quickly jump onto that and just press the play button. Yeah. Okay. Alrighty, and so Pluto through Capricorn, reflections on a changing world. And again, like I said, this is presented by myself, SΥmµον. And what I want to do is look through Pluto's transits in Capricorn, 2008 until 2024. So part of this is like the closing cycle of human identity. And for every one of us that studies astrology deeply, you'll know that at least from EA's perspective, which to me I resonate deeply with, the nature of the sign of Capricorn and its connection to Aries and its connection to Libra and its connection to Cancer, which I'll get into a little bit more deeper in this slide. This is about change. This is about initiation of a new direction. So it's not uncommon for us to actually notice that certain transits that we're actually having right now, especially the outer planets, for instance, Neptune through Pisces. You know, Neptune is in Pisces particularly is all about the culmination phase. So it's, you know, it's a beautiful synchronicity with Pluto transiting through Capricorn and Neptune through Pisces, that we have this configuration of dissolving, this configuration of whatever was and whatever sense of identity that we once had. This is what I was talking about, the Cancer archetype, which is the polarity of Capricorn. This is about our ending cycle. And I think that in 2016, December, we actually went through the apex of that, in my opinion. I think that that was the huge shift with the south nodes, and I think there was also a lunar eclipse or solar eclipse happening with the Pisces energy on the Neptune, and also the fact that President Trump was coming into power during that period of time, and just reflecting to us the natural dissolving of how we elect, especially in the States, how we elect or society sees presidents or a political infrastructure, that being completely different. I mean, he's not even part of any political structure. He was an entrepreneur that just grew up naturally. You could see how our relationship to things have shifted. So this is a closing cycle of human identity, and I'll highlight these points. I also want to bring to our attention the potential new direction on a new world, and how this is developing right in front of us. And I feel that what's really beautiful about this transit, even if it appears intensely deep and dark and uncertain at this stage, is that right in front of us, we're noticing that within a period of 10 years, if you own a landline, you probably use that about 10%, not even 5% in your life. That's it. Whereas in the 1950s, 1960s, and even 70s, that was something that was a common use in a household. The nature of the way that we use telecom, for instance, has shifted completely, the way that we communicate. In 1989, 1990, the way that email was done was something that was intensely specific to anybody that was working in a computer industry. Whereas today, anybody, for that matter, that has very limited understanding of computers can send an email. The nature of the way that we connect with each other has shifted so much, and it's developing so fast at this stage that we are actually not really seeing the change as great as what is actually occurring, because we're in the moment every single time, every single day, every single week. We're seeing things that are changing, but it's only over a span of 10 years do we notice that the existence of Kodak, for instance, is no longer on the planet. It's only something that people use in films, whereas nobody takes a picture with a Kodak camera anymore. It's all digital. That's gone. It's completely, and the employees that worked for that and the infrastructure and technology that was put into that experience is no longer necessary. The way that, for instance, and I'll go into this again deeper, the way that newspapers are run and the way that the structure exists within the newspaper industry, right? Firstly, 80% of all of our news is online through our tablets, through our phones. Right? And most of the people that are presenting any forms of news have gotten rid of 40–50% of their department, because they don't need these researchers anymore, because of the nature of how information is being cross-marketed and, exactly cross-marketed. So what was once a job and a secure job in the 1970s, 1980s in terms of college or a sense of life direction is obsolete today. It's not even part of this. And going into the future, things like self-automated cars, people will not even probably be using banks. My children will probably don't even know what a bank account is at some point, or to know what 3 to 5 days waiting time is, or the way that we as human beings relate in terms of invest money on a Monday to Friday business day, because it's just disappearing under us. So Pluto through Capricorn, reflections on a changing world. By the way, for anybody that's interested in the work that you've never met me before, or you can find me on YouTube for Raising Vibrations Astrology, and otherwise my website, which is SΥmÖN Vorster.com. Okay. So before I jump into this over here, for anybody that's new to this process, let me just talk a little bit about the nature of what Pluto represents and what Capricorn represents as an archetype, right? So that's a symbol of Pluto. And Pluto, from an evolutionary astrology perspective, and from my opinion, what it actually represents in terms of life, the nature of life, life force itself, we're dealing with the nature of evolution. And why is it evolution? Because everything that has been grown up until this point, at some point is evolving consistently. So like Jeffrey Wolf Green taught about in his schools and in the paradigm, we're always in a constant state of becoming. There's always something that is developing and growing as each moment is becoming alive. And so there's a process here in which we are experiencing new things consistently, just as we're experiencing this new sharing today. Okay, we're evolving, we're expanding. And part of this experience is that each emotional and psychological and spiritual relationship that we have to things that are developing for us is being crystallized into a sense of identity, a sense of meaning, a sense of relationship that we develop with this. And of course, over a period of time, we naturally go through cycles in which what was once significant, Kodak as an example, the way in which we used to have these little films and they'd put them inside a little camera and then you would take pictures of that and then you would have to go get them developed, etc. It's gone. But at that point, when that was being developed, that emerging market was like, wow, we're evolving. And so everything comes to a point in which it needs to die to create new. And this is a natural product within our society, within human condition, within the biology of nature itself. It's there. And we constantly metamorphosing. So Pluto represents this element, this energy pattern within our life structure, in which whatever no longer works for us, whatever is not empowering to us, whatever is not giving us growth or allowing for anything to be that growing, it's going to at some point become obsolete through the law of impermanence. It just materializes into nothingness and it becomes a distant memory. So Pluto is evolution. It is the ongoing process of something that is mutating itself. And whatever dies then regrows. Okay? So when we look at Capricorn as an archetype, I mean, this is a very, this is a huge archetype in itself, but in its most primitive form, we're understanding the nature of structure. We're understanding the nature of how the formation of boundaries and form gets created through connections of experiences. So when we look at Capricorn, for instance, we can actually relate it to the nature of time from the perspective that from when we started the Zoom meeting up until this point in time, there are these two abstract points in time in which we measure the distance, and the distance we use a timepiece or a clock, for instance. And so Capricorn measures the distance over there, but really what Capricorn is actually measuring is not necessarily the content in the middle, that's Pisces. It's the boundaries and reflections on each side that reveal to us what is inside there. And so that's why when we look at Capricorn as an archetype, we're looking at the boundaries and the definition and the sense of structure that inherently gives us a sense of identity through the reflection of light. In other words, how we see. So when we look at Capricorn and we correlate it, again, astrology does not create life, it just merely reflects it. We're seeing that the structural form of the organism that is the human condition, that is the structure of biology in terms of nature, etc., that formation, that process that we as human beings have related to for 256 years, and that's how long Pluto will go through the zodiac in itself, that cycle of whatever was maturing then is now coming to a close. And so in some sense, you can say things like the industrial age, which is, that's not something that's lasted that period of time, but you can see that this is coming to the end. Okay. And by 2027 and this period of time, there will be no such thing as that anymore. It will just simply not exist because there's no need for us. We as human beings don't want to sit at a desk for 8 hours a day feeling completely fulfilled by this experience when we see all of our friends traveling the world talking about these amazing experiences that they're having in these vortexes of energy that, are coined, just amazing places to be. people want to write blogs and talk about their adventures. We're becoming more abstract in our experiences of things. Even the nature of money in itself is going to be completely and utterly bizarre to us going forward. That's what I'm talking about with the banks, is that when you look at things like Bitcoin as an example, or any forms of cryptocurrency, the nature of this development has occurred because of Pluto's through Capricorn. So the structural formation of how we as a society and a world have governed ourselves is now coming into this restructuring, this reforming, this death and decay process that is eventually mutating us into something. So sometimes a part of us must die before another part can come to life. Even though this is a natural and necessary part of our growth, it is often painful, or, if we don't realize what's happening, confusing and disorientating. And this is, for a lot of people that are not really understanding of what's going on right now in terms of their depth of relationship to astrology. Or why do you think if you go onto the internet and you type astrology, how many astrologers have all of a sudden gone, oh my God, I can actually do something on the YouTube by giving people a reassurance that like the astrology and these things are happening? Like, think about the way that we relate to ourselves. Think about the posts that we're consistently putting out there. Look at the underlying message. 70% of it is about reassuring us that whatever's going on right now has a logical explanation with regards to astrology or other forms. Either way, look at the emotional security that develops in you in a world that is completely disorientated and confusing. Ironically, it's funny because if you just look outside, you can actually see that it doesn't seem to be that way. The birds are still doing whatever they're still doing. The sun is still there. You can walk out your house and go and have a lovely like little stroll and feel good in yourself. And yet the moment you come onto Facebook or interact with large groups of people sharing this, you can, or go on TV, for instance, you can see that there is insanity that's consistently bombarding us. So during this period of time of upheaval, in other words, Pluto bringing all of these emotional experiences and structures that we once completely and utterly gave all of our attention to and believed in and said, this is how life is, has come to the surface, and it says, no, it's rotting, no longer needing this anymore. And the onset of the Pluto and Scorpio generation and the generations after that, their energy cycles are completely different to us. When I say like Pluto through Libra and then onwards, because most of us didn't grow up with Facebook. Most of us didn't grow up with the living on edge energy of what 9/11 created in the collective psyche, as an example, amongst other things. Of course, there are other things like Cuban nuclear crisis that was happening in 1965, 66, Pluto and Virgos. But you're getting what I'm talking about here, right? It's this process of the whole entire structure and boundaries and what we once held on to as the father figure for our young developing psyches. It's no longer there anymore. All of a sudden, there's this vast empty space in which we've got to find a sense of security. Polarity point of Capricorn is actually Cancer. Again, like I shared, this is the sense of identity, the emotional relationship that we have to the phenomena of reality. Okay. So, by the way, if anybody has something to say during this period of time, please feel free to, like make a comment in the chat or, unmute the thing and just say, I want to say something or ask a question. I'd be super happy for that if you've got something to add as well. Okay, so I just wanted to share with everybody today just a little bit about the nature of this energy pattern. So we have Pluto actually moving through Capricorn, okay, since 2008. Now, we've also had Uranus sitting in Aries since 2012, and we've had Neptune in Pisces, for, I think Neptune in Pisces was what, 2011? It began 2012 also. Can someone correct me over there? It's not so much information in my head. But yeah, so what we have here is this Uranus energy, and it's making a square to Pluto and Capricorn. Now, the natural connection between Capricorn and Aries is that Capricorn talks about structure and form and boundaries, and Aries says total need for freedom to explore something new. I desire this need for exploration. I need to be a pioneer in a new direction. It's not a coincidence that once this square between Uranus and Pluto started to manifest itself in 2012, that we began to see the disruption take place around Arab Spring, as for instance. Okay, look at what was happening in Africa during that period of time with Gaddafi as well. Look at how at that point in time as well, the intensity regarding the way that governments and banking systems were being made or being brought to light, and the frustration levels that were held in the collective psyche during those periods of time. I mean, I remember actually watching specifically, it was in Venezuela, where there were youths, like 17, 18-year-old kids, that were picking up weapons and running straight into governmental like police forces, okay, and having themselves killed because of their deep frustration of their oppression from governmental structures. Okay, Uranus and Aries square Pluto. But because Uranus was like 1-2 degrees of Aries, the nature of this freedom was so volatile that the actions of the youth were not thinking about how to actually bring about change in a world that was going to liberate us from these structures. Today, we have loads and loads of groups of people just doing it in a very quiet and peaceful way, and that effect of change is occurring. But during that period of time, it was intensely volatile. So the point I'm trying to make here is that during this transit, the need for liberation, Pluto and Capricorn squaring Uranus and Aries, was bringing about intense disruption, a new direction. But because of the energy being so underdeveloped in terms of what it represented in us, it came out extremely erratic. There's one specific YouTube video that I have saved. I will keep it there as a reminder of what actually triggered my own personal direction into doing this type of work. And I think it's actually quite famous, to be honest. It was like I can't remember specifically what the environment was about, but it was a guy sitting at a table at a news desk, and one day he just like lost it completely. And it's familiar with some of you, I'm sure, about that. And he started like calling out all of the lies and distruth and information that have kept people in this zombie state, okay? And was like, this is insane. This is what is going on here. And he lost the plot on live TV. And this was something that then went viral on the internet. And this, I know for a fact, had begun the initiation phase of people waking up in a way of going, hold on. And just this kind of curiosity to go, why do I feel this deep need to begin questioning things? Why do I feel this deep need to start looking at the nature of reality, Pluto through Capricorn, and ask myself, is this really what human life is all about? And this is the message here today. It's the process in which these energies to the fullest potential are allowing us to go, it's a shake-up, it's a wake-up, it's a like, let's look at the way that we structure ourselves and ask ourselves, is this really what human life is all about? This 9-to-5 experience in which we live out this idea of what we're supposed to be, Pluto through Capricorn, follow and chasing ideas of success, Pluto through Capricorn, and then materializing our life based on this definition, even though we're completely disassociated from what we truly, truly know in our hearts, because it's all a mental game. It's all a mind-orientated indoctrination. And it's a very confronting subject to talk about. Pluto through Capricorn and the nature of Pluto, Scorpio through Saturn through Scorpio was a deeply, deeply dark time for a lot of people, because the uncovering and the veil lifting, where we began to recognize the disempowerment that the collective has in each country, in each culture, around how we've governed ourselves. And again, this is not like done to us on purpose on some degree. It's just the level of awakening, the level of awareness that we've matured through. So this natural cycle of bringing more attention to this process and recognizing more of what is important for us is actually a catalyst for the change that's occurring. And that's the message here again, for us to actually wake up to this process. The later stages of Pluto's transit through Capricorn are going to be about self-mastery, are going to be about the process of what the archetype of Jesus really represented in the Bible in its truest form, not the distorted, washed down hand experience of what religion gave us as a control mechanism. And this was self-mastery, like the ability for us to actually govern ourselves in a way in which we recognize and take responsibility for each of our own personal material plane that we exist within. And this is this potential. But obviously we needed to break down a lot of these distortions and structures. And of course, there's still an intense amount of emotional and collective displacement regarding the way that our psyche has been traumatized through all of the institutions that have occurred. So this transit of Pluto through Capricorn and a square to Uranus and Aries has been a hugely disruptive experience. And a lot of emotion came up for us during this period of time, particularly when Jupiter moved through Cancer. You must see that when we look at the nature of Capricorn in itself, it makes a complete opposition. There we go, to Cancer. And for any of you that have studied the nodes themselves, the planetary nodes, you'll know that Pluto's south node sits there, Saturn's south node sits there, and most of Jupiter's south node sits there. It's not a coincidence that the nature of our time has become so intensely bizarre as Pluto has moved over these symbols over here. You just have to look at reality and talk to that's why I asked everybody in this beginning phase, how have you experienced your life change over so? Look at the aspects of your truths, your belief systems, your cosmologies. Look at the nature of how your friends have changed. Look at your family dynamics. Look at all those things and ask yourself how this has changed you in a way that is, for the better or for the worse. It depends. If you feel completely isolated and alienated from all of your family members because you can't relate to them, because all of a sudden you're like, here's a bit of material over here that doesn't make sense. And we believe in this, but I don't, because we need to be questioning it. Like, why are we not using our own mental capacity to question and look at stuff with a critical eye? Why are we just taking everything as gospel, as an example? These are all the things that would naturally materialize Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn as Pluto moves over it. What beliefs and truths have you held on an ancestral level? And how is that reshaping the sense of identity and emotional relationship that you have to your new home, like your new body? As an example, I mean, I remember specifically, and again, I don't subscribe to this at the level at which maybe the people do, but like, for instance, a person by the name of Dolores Cannon had mentioned something about a new Earth. And it was funny because when there was I think it's 2005 Sedona talks with Jeffrey Wolf Green, one person asks at that stage, are we going to be moving to a new Earth? And I always remember that moment, because he looked at it and was like, what's going on here? How would we be moving to a new Earth? But in a sense, if you think about it in a deep metaphysical way, think of the nature of your home being completely and utterly changed relative to Pluto's movement through Capricorn, and it restructuring your sense of identity and your roots. How many of you belong to new group identities? And I'll bring up the EA Zoom meetings in this way, because most of us have found a new home here. I mean, there's an emotional relationship to the way that you see everybody in this Zoom meeting, and everybody's here on some degree every single time. Coming back and meeting with friends and family and family, I put it as family. How many of you have gotten rid of old friends on Facebook and gotten new friends that you never even thought you would be making, but then made through Zoom meetings or a webinar that happened that you joined about something that you were learning, etc.? Like, the whole entire structure of your sense of identity and emotional relatability to who you feel familiar with on a deeply spiritual level and a soulful level has also reconstructed itself. And in sense, you can actually say that would be a new Earth experience. But it's a beautiful poetic way to understand Cancer as a way of home in that sense. Okay.
SΥmონ?
Yeah.
I just thought of something as you were talking about talking about that. The thing that just popped in my mind was a turning of the soil. If you've ever gardened, and how you turn the soil, and that seems to be what this process, Pluto and Cap, with Jupiter in Libra and Uranus in Aries, because when you turn that soil, you bring up those dormant seeds that in the soil that have been just sitting there, and now once they've been exposed to the light, they begin to sprout. So that just kind of popped in my head when you were talking.
That's so beautiful. I mean, I even have goosebumps and talking about that. Like, the whole entire serotonin in my body just resonated so deeply with that, because if you think about it, like, gardening in itself and the turning of the soil is it's nourishing the ground. We're allowing for the future, the potential for our growth process to to have the best amount of nutrition in it by turning the soil, by allowing these seeds that were at the bottom of it to actually access light and to grow, like the potential for human existence to actually like metamorphosize, right?
Yeah, that's definitely that composting process for
right?
real. And the turning of the compost. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a really, really cool experience. You know, what's also really interesting about this, and I'll share this, is, you know, when you look at the connection between Pluto in Capricorn and, you know, the Libra archetype, again, even if there's no planets over here, whenever a planet's moving through Capricorn or moving through Pisces or moving through Aquarius, it's always going to be affected by the other signs, as an example. So just very briefly, going a little bit off topic, the reason why we experience detachment and shock when we lose something is because when loss occurs, Scorpio, it's breaking away from something. We're detaching from it. It's no longer an identity. When you look at the connection between, okay, these are terrible. So I'm going to come back to my Virgo-ness over here and just draw the line like that instead. There we go. Whenever we experience loss, right, emotional connection, self-identity, and we experience loss, that emotional ego gets taken away, right? So when we lose somebody, for instance, we can no longer feel their physical presence. We can no longer have that physical connection with them in that sense. And of course, that immediately sends us into a detached state. We can only experience their memories from a distant place, as an example, or experience it in a more transcendental state of being. So the zodiac in itself carries an intense amount of knowledge in there. And so when we've got Pluto through Capricorn, its effects on the nature of our relationship, Libra, to society is changing and is fundamentally regrowing itself in that sense. So, you know, when we look at the square that's taking place with Jupiter at the moment, it's not a coincidence that most of the news that we see on the world right now is so much about power and where the distribution of that power is landing, and how much darkness is existing in certain areas in which there are deep structures that are dependent on the security of what they've built in the past. So it's hilarious, because most of us that would walk over to the government structures, specifically banking elites and stuff, and say, oh, we feel that it's deeply unfair that you charge the extortionate amount of interest plus all of these other forms of taxation that you have on people. And why are you doing this? It like seems really, really stupid. You should be ashamed of yourself. Like, that's never going to have any effect, even if it's the complete truth, because not only is their emotional security attached to the formation and structures of their own empowerment process, it's never going to change. It's just as we would never feel safe and secure if the people came over to our house and said, look, unfortunately, you haven't paid your bills here or your rent for whatever long, and now we're going to have to remove you. And now you're sitting on the street or at a friend's house living on a couch, and you have absolutely no security pattern. You don't want to let go of those things. So Pluto through Capricorn is also this deep internal process of the amount of security that we have placed in structures and institutions and societies that provide us with a sense of comfort that no longer Pluto is going, well, I don't care anymore because it's no longer for this. It's not empowering. It's not providing us with growth. So we've got to confront these limitations in that sense. Okay, so let's just quickly go over to the spotlight over here. Decentralization of power. Government's power abuse. Pluto through Capricorn. Like, again, sharing this whole entire experience over here. When you've got a centralized banking system or any forms of governmental structures that are in place, you've got to ask yourself the question, why are we believing in this? What is the fundamental faith that we still have programmed within our psyche that makes us believe that we need these institutions in order for us to be governed in a way that's beneficial for us? And these are really, really, really powerful questions that are being asked, firstly, by an immense amount of people out there that are incredibly brave and incredibly courageous, sticking their necks out and going, this is nonsense. And they are leading the way for a lot of us to actually step into realities where we are able to become a lot more sovereign in our ability to make decisions for ourselves in that sense. And this is a very scary thing, because I've been incredibly inspired to a certain degree by a great deal of people that have taken on very, very, very dangerous tasks of bringing attention to the public, to the world, in which we have just taken for granted this is how life is. But really, there's this deep, deep, deep underlying psychological disempowerment state that we as a collective subscribe to, because it is a belief system that is inherently within us. That is not something that we essentially have like done in some way. It's just that the nature of what has been a collective truth has allowed for this somber state to exist. And so the abuse of power has just materialized because it's so easy. It's so easy to do that. And I think that the more Pluto through Capricorn's polarity point in Cancer, the power exists within the people. There's a meme that goes out on the internet, exists, where you see a politician standing on a plank on the ledge of a mountain range, right? He's actually outside where there is no mountain range. And he's standing over there, and all the people are standing on the other side of the plank on the mountain, completely holding a politician up. And what we don't have, and this is a beautiful thing, and I forgot to mention it, was that Pluto through Capricorn talks about self-reflection. If every single one of you had at least gone through your Saturn return, or at least your second Saturn return, or any Pluto through your 10th house, or you have Pluto in your 10th house, will know about the nature of that Saturn transit. That is a deeply, deeply melancholic, depressive time in which the nature of your life is about coming so deeply within yourself. You have to feel limited in your capacity to know yourself at the deepest level. Self-reflection. I mean, it is honestly the spiritual state of the Pluto, the Capricorn archetype. It's the feminine inward energy of who am I? So the whole entire globe is going through this transit of who are we? How do we identify ourselves? And on one deep level, how has that identification allowed us to bring to the attention the things that we might not necessarily want to actually look at? So I'm just going to stop over here. One person had written, could you give us a hint, SÍmON, how the coming transit of Saturn in Cap will help or improve or not Pluto's Capricorn's activity? Thank you. Okay, so I actually have got that saved for the next slide, and I'll try and attempt to respond to that question. So thanks very much for asking that, by the way. Okay, so again, this whole entire understanding of institutions. I hope that I'm not going over time over here, but institutions. In the past, we've institutionalized structure. Why? Because it's all centralized. Why? Because the majority of human experience up until this point in time has been really about this belief system in one central authority distributing knowledge in a way that then gives us the authority to go then and distribute it elsewhere. Now, there are positive things to information being controlled at a mature level that allows for it to not like become distorted or twisted or manipulated for evil agendas. So I'm not saying that the governance of knowledge in itself or wisdom or any forms of education should not be distributed, destroyed, but that institutions themselves correlate to a belief system again that we each have. We give a belief system to an institution. And once we stop that belief system from occurring, Saturn through Sagittarius, we start to notice that the fundamental needs of that institution and what it provided for us no longer can work, because all of them require our attention because it is serving us to a certain degree. But when that serving becomes something that is rooted deeply in evil, then we have an issue. And this is what Pluto through Capricorn is doing as well, is allowing us to recognize where the abuse of power has occurred. Because we're human after all. We're all consumed by our desires. Every single one of us, that's why we're here. Pluto, polarity points, Jeffrey Wolf Green's material. So when we look at institutions, this whole entire thing is going to become decentralized. Banking and financial industry is on its way out right now, right? You're looking at the nature of how information, just look at astrology as an example. And I talk about this in the next one, but just look at how we learn, okay? None of us today feel this deep burning desire to go to college and go and get an astrological degree as our first recommendation. We actually go, hey, I like that guy's way of teaching, or I like that guy, that person, or that lady's way of teaching. I really resonate with her perspective. I really resonate with his perspective. Oh, I see they've got courses up. Wow, I'd really like to learn through that experience. Notice the difference between the way that we learn today versus the way that we have identified with learning in the past. okay? Even to the institutions regarding schooling systems in itself. And you just go and talk to any child that is Pluto through Sag right now, or a majority of the Pluto and Scorps, and you ask them, do you like an institution? And 80% of them will turn around and go, I hated the experience or hate the experience. Because we know that it is something where we don't get free will to choose what we want to learn. How many of us today, quote unquote, we use geography, we use like basic economics language and whatever we learn through school. It's very primitive in that sense. But how many of you today, connecting with your heart, connecting with what you feel deeply, deeply inspired to want to know about yourself and how it opens you up, how much of that was taught at school? How much of that, how much agriculture, how much self-development, how much emotional healing was developed at that period of time? None. So by the time you get to the age of 30, you're already at a point in your life in which technically we're still very, very useful in our experience. It's only after that that we begin to start seeking the way in which we really want to actually cultivate ourselves. By the time you get to 40, you're already at a point in which you've only already had 10 years worth of education about the things you really want. Honestly. It's just things like that that are changing right now, that are coming up and are being brought to the surface, where the younger generations are going to be like, why? I can learn everything I want on the internet. Fair enough, it might be information that is watered down or information that might be not as deep in that sense, but it's there. The internet has completely and utterly revolutionized the way that we exist. The other thing that's really, really deeply, deeply painful, and a lot of us can find a profound amount of sadness and empathy for this, and this is racial wars, the borders and hierarchy. Pluto through Capricorn is bringing to us the attention of the amount of boundaries and the amount of conditioning that has been damaged on our collective psyche with regards to racial wars. The division. Your skin color is white, my skin color is black, your skin color is yellow, your skin color is something. And my country or culture says that you have got some issue against us. So therefore, because I'm a nationalism or I belong to some governmental structure that has indoctrinated me to do this, I'm going to therefore see your skin color and your cultural definitions as what you are, but not see you as the person. So we've lost complete touch with the actual connection of human behavior in that sense. When I say human behavior, the behavior of humanity in itself is through these separations. But the fact that we are deeply, deeply connected to the same space, we all came from the same place, every single one of us. We're all unified in that way, and yet that is shut off completely. Let's look at things like what has recently occurred. You take the dairy industry as an example. How many of us, up until we watched a documentary or saw something on TV, noticed how the dairy industry was developing the product that we would get at the store, and how disconnected we were from that process? And that when we saw how the dairy industry was treating animals as a way for us to provide mass milk production, we went, yeah, that seems a little bit messed up at this point in time. I don't really think that this is okay. How do I feel about this? Intense amounts of emotions just rush to the surface. Do we think that this is a good idea? Like we would completely think it's okay to drink and again, I'm deeply sorry for if I'm like being confrontational here. And again, I'm not telling everybody to follow these belief systems. I'm just sharing, okay? Is that we look at, say, for instance, drinking milk. It comes from the cow's breast. Yet we would be deeply disturbed if we saw a baby or an adult drinking the milk from a pig. Just this type of like attention to the way that we have defined ourselves, that is like protected us from looking outside of what we actually do in terms of other concepts, has allowed us to recognize that this Pluto to Capricorn transit is actually redefining the whole entire nature of how we actually identify with ourselves in that sense. And maybe some of us have had to go through that intense process of going, well, I don't really think that this is okay for us to be treating animals this way for my own sense of comfort. I'm sure there is another way. There can be another way. And that would be the question to raise out of this experience. Is there potentially now another way for us to behave, because we are a lot more civilized in that sense? And we can create a smartphone that can do all these wonderful things, and yet it's completely obscure to us to think of potential and new directions to materialize the comfort that we can still provide ourselves with, because it's not about going back to the Stone Age again or living in shacks. It's not about that. It's we can still have this material plane, just in a way that is not based on hierarchy, not in a way in which you come home from work one day and you go, you know, I really need a holiday away from the job I hate. And so therefore I'm going to go to a place that is going to give me a loan that I know that when I get the loan, I'm going to invest into this holiday that I'm going to take. And then for the next 2 years afterwards, I'm going to be paying this loan back so that I can escape the job I don't like. And what happens is the cycle just allows us to consistently keep disempowering, disassociating, instead of going, hold on, maybe I take a loan out, maybe I invest in a certain life direction that is deeply, deeply empowering to my own self. And then I can actually get out of this situation and live the life that I want to relative to what awakens my heart, as an example. So we begin to watch Pluto through Capricorn decentralize power by breaking down banking or forms of governmental structures that have imposed deep layers of debt on every single person, especially the states, that you have to climb through, that you have no hope of getting through the hierarchy. As an example, breaking down borders, breaking down the hierarchy structure, and allowing for the ego to not exist in a way in which one person has power that distributes all the information out to everybody and then consistently through slave mentality tells people to say that this is what you've got to do. Fear-based economy. I mean, think about the nature of what money is. It's a language. It's a language defined through the way that we trade our needs, and it has materialized and matured and gone through the stages in which we exist. At one point, we had coins. And when somebody said, here's a bunch of coins for all the work that you did today, go buy bananas, we felt like, hold on, before we would just get a bunch of bananas, now you're giving me coins to go and buy a banana. This seems really, really dodgy and weird. Then all of a sudden, paper money came into process and we felt insecure about that process as well. Okay, so now I can have this paper money and then go buy those bananas. And now we have credit cards or debit cards, and it's become sort of like abstract in that sense. So here's a diner's card. Now go purchase, you can go do whatever you want with that. No money. And now, I mean, I live in Sweden, for instance, and this is like cashless society project 101. At some point, it's just going to not exist here, right? Funds in that sense. That's an obscure experience for us to move so rapidly into these ever-changing experiences in which money in itself has become something that's becoming even more abstract. And that becomes even more intense because all of a sudden when you look at your bank account, you just see figures. Whereas before you could actually kind of like, to a certain degree, objectify the nature of how much you had through the amount of notes you had or coins. But now it's just digits. And that becomes even more intense because it's like, if your digits dwindle, fear-based. It just triggers the amygdala, it just triggers the nature of the reptilian brain. And all of a sudden you're making decisions from this deep space of security, which is part of the biology, versus the heart. So that even limits our capacity to feel inspired to take on bigger experiences. So Pluto through Capricorn is bringing all of this to the surface and saying, do you think that this is okay? Do you think the structure of our society is working for us? And it's not, because again, like I said, there are immense amounts of people out there. They're taking on this intense courageous role of just wanting to destroy this and decentralize it and give back the actual power back to the people, because that's where we deserve it. It's how can you not feel that this is your lifetime for you to have control and power over it? So I'm going to check the chat quickly. I see that Linda's saying to me there's 5 to 10 minutes left. So I'm going to move over to my last slide, and I hope I've covered a lot over here, or shared quite a lot. A new society. Under no illusion am I and everybody else to have this, that some utopian world is arriving after Pluto enters Aquarius or any form of this. This is not the case. But what I can suggest and what I can subscribe to as potential for us to become even more inspired to share, to be inviting within our hearts. In other words, the way that we can understand how trajectory of humanity is going is to recognize a new development of society in which the wealth is with the people, and the people contain the peer-to-peer access. So for instance, if I come to you today, just as this thing, as I wrote it here, sovereign education, direct knowledge through EA Zoom meetings, how many of you have actually sat down to contemplate the nature of abundance and wealth that exists in this YouTube channel, with the amount of astrologers that have done the various amounts of topics? In what, how long has it been? 6 months. 6 months of worth of material is on this YouTube channel. That
1 year.
Pardon?
1 year.
1 year. But like in the last 6 months, it's really grown. But yes, okay, 1 year. In 1 year, look at the amount of content that's available here with all these different amounts of subjects that you can just go, I'm just going to binge watch all of this and just deeply, deeply learn everything over here. And all of a sudden, what I've done in 1 year is what can maybe be accomplished in 5 years worth of spending all of the amounts of money in investing into a government system that's going to say, well, this college costs this or that education costs that. And so therefore, we're going to help you out, but we're also going to tell you that for the rest of your life, you need to go and get a job to make sure that you pay these things. Otherwise, you live on the street. It's like the relationship of wealth becomes redistributed. And again, wealth is not just finance. It's about the ability to transcend the nature of what actually is value. Pluto through Capricorn, I remember, again, as I talked to you about in terms of the zodiac, Taurus and Virgo are also part of this process. So your competence, Virgo, relative to your abundance and self-worth, Taurus, links with your capacity to be defined and give life direction, Capricorn. And that becomes more empowered sovereign. So if each of us turned within and said, okay, how can I spend at least an hour a day contemplating just about what I can invest in myself, and even taking it to the next level and being a little bit fanatical like myself and saying, how much can I invest in everything in myself? Because, and not in a narcissistic way. I'm not talking about like completely doing the opposite and just taking everything and being like, I deserve this. It's more along the lines of like, what can I learn today that's going to enrich my life and the quality of my life, not only in this moment, but also for everybody else as I distribute that to the people in a peer-to-peer exchange, right? And it happens. So institutions no longer have any value anymore through this new societal structure that's emerging on the planet right now. Think about the Pluto and Sagittarius, look where Uranus is and look where Neptune is. It's all in Aquarius. It's not a coincidence that this is materializing on the planet when these kids get older and they start to go, yeah, which is the tribe that I belong to again? Who's the people that what are the group of people that really resonate with what I feel and recognize? And how is that done in a natural way? Pluto through Sag. So institutions will dissolve completely and we'll have groups. And groups will represent where the knowledge and information is held. One thing that, again, like I said, with Kodak, MP3s, before we had like cassettes, and you had to have a specific like radio that could play a cassette, Walkman as an example. Think about Sony, think about the structure of their like product. They built this Walkman and they were like, wow, this is amazing. This is innovative. And all of a sudden MP3s come along. Now your whole entire computer can be turned into a radio station in that sense. And that becomes completely transpersonal. It's no longer do you walk around with a cassette anymore. And on some of us that are old school in some way will be like, wow, I remember the day where I had that like little cassette with that song on it and you used to play around with those little things in the middle. That's what MP3s did. The invention of MP3s completely changed it. Uranus conjunct Neptune in Capricorn in 1994, 1993 began the evolution of this process. And by 2002, 2003, again, like I said, internet was becoming available. Who would have thought that when the military created the internet and developed it, that in 2016, 17, they would have the largest database of all forms of animal videos on YouTube? And when did they ever think that most of Instagram would be considered the place in which you would go get inspiration to get a meal or to see somebody take a picture of themselves at a specific angle is called a selfie? When did you ever think that in 1998 or even in 1989, and when people were developing the internet in a way that could be user-friendly, we're going to mature here? So the potential for this new society is evolving right now under us. And you will watch this process occur in which, think about it. Like I said, Bitcoin as an example, research it. Look at what cryptocurrency is actually about. Not Bitcoin itself, not what cryptocurrency is in terms of like money. I'm talking about why is it in existence today? What has brought about this material? Why are people responding this way? Understand the deeper concepts that are occurring. What is uTorrent? Look at how MP3s became, it was first Napster, and then it became LimeWire. Like the whole entire process of everything being shut down just moved until eventually it became things like uTorrent, peer-to-peer, distribution of power to the people. And so all of a sudden we become empowered and we become less centralized on one government dictating to us what we should be. How many of you have ever thought about this? You read a magazine and you went, oh, here's a diet for me. And you go and you look on this diet and you're like, wow, this is not working for me, but I feel deeply insecure. I feel guilty. I feel pathetic about myself because I'm not adhering to these codes of conduct about how I need to have this diet. It's not working for me. And you go, how is this person ever able to know what's good for me if they've never met me in my life, but are writing in a magazine saying to me that this is what's good for me? The fact that our attention is outside of ourselves is where the development process is coming back to us. And the more that we bring it back to ourselves, the more that we bring it back to our self-empowered sense of we have wealth in us, the more empowered we will actually move through this transit and notice an enriching existence. So like I said, again, just one thing over here, ebooks, courses, Facebook groups, the way that we learn is changed completely. I know now that if I want to go read up on something cool or have a deeper understanding of something, I'll go onto the web, Jeffrey Wolf Green School. There it's got that whole entire thing amongst many other evolutionary astrology pages, or I go listen to Kristen Fontana's weekly radio show as an example, or I come to here, or I ask a question in a group, and then there's like 30 people that will have their direct knowing of an experience that they will share. Sharing amongst people and allowing us to actually have the distribution of wealth, not centralized and conducted and dictated by a certain person, and have history told to us. So the complete idea of following history just dissolves because we're in the moment growing as everything is exponentially materializing itself. Think about the things of like a vegan movement that's been growing. There are different layers of this experience. Think about the nature of vaccinations versus non-vaccinations. Think about the process of how things are changing regarding, like I said, finances. And of course, the way that we learn. And in the future, with Uranus transiting through Aries, through Taurus, think about the nature of what's going to mean for us when Uranus transits through Taurus. Self-supportive systems, self-investment. Taurus is all about self-sustainability. And to go back maybe to that question, just to briefly answer it, and I'll end off over here with closing this. I know that I've gone over my time, I'm sorry. But just to think about the nature of Saturn's transit through Capricorn. And as it moves through onto Pluto, that's the tipping point. That's the process in which we recognize that either we're going to be completely and utterly part of giving our attention and our energy to something that is centralized and say, you're going to make the decisions for me, or every single day of your life leading up to the rest of your life, you're going to be making conscious choices to say, what am I investing in that is going to enhance the quality of my life right now? And also, how can I then share it with the next person that's going to enhance their quality so that the spreading of information and knowledge and wealth gets distributed in a way that is not conditioned or centralized, so that we don't need to have institutions or any forms of governmental structures that require us to have to give away our power. Pluto through Capricorn, the complete surrender or the empowerment of our sense of identity. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for allowing me to stand on my soapbox over here and share this with you today. I hope that you you got something out of it.
Okay, thank you so much, SΥmონ. That was brilliant as usual. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. And thanks from everybody here.
Thank you, SΥmUN. Thank you, Linda.
Sure. And so I gave him a hug, and I was like, oh my God, this made my night. And he's like, it made my night. And later he told me, he was like,
someone's on the phone. Thanks, SΥmон. Bye.
You made me feel